Good morning and welcome to Sunday worship with the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We're located in Durham, North Carolina, on the ancestral lands of the Eno, Sissipaha, Shakori, Sapani, and Lumbee people. I'm Reverend Patty Hanneman, a member of this congregation, and I am with you this morning while the Reverends Deborah Kerr and Jacqueline Brett are away refreshing their spirits. It's been a joy to be with you all these past 4 Sundays, and our ministers will be back with us all next Sunday. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whomever you love, whatever spiritual path calls to you, we are glad that you have joined us this morning. Welcome. If you're new to this community, and especially if this is your first time with us today, please introduce yourselves to us in the chat box. You'll also find there a link that will tell you more about us. There's going to be a virtual inquirers class at noon today where you can learn about our pastoral care services and small groups at ERUUF. We also invite you to join our virtual coffee hour that will happen directly after this morning's service. You can find out how to access both of these events on your screen. They'll appear on your screen right after the service is over, as well as the chat box. You can also find out how to join these events through our website, eruuf.org. In the middle of the homepage under events, you'll find all the information you need. Our guest minister this morning is the Reverend Darrick Jackson. Reverend Jackson is the Director of Ministries for Lifelong Learning for the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association, and he's also an affiliated community minister with the Second Unitarian Church of Chicago. He's one of the authors in the book Centering: Navigating Race, Authenticity, and Power in Ministry. Reverend Darrick is also an active member of Durham and is the treasurer for Healing Moments, which is a ministry for caregivers of people with Alzheimer's. We are honored to have him speaking with us today. Today's live music is provided by Kate Lewis on the piano, and Joan Tilkman will be our cantor for our closing hymn today. Our tech team includes Sean Trimble and Michelle Sager. Jim Van Verth is our sound engineer. Thank you all for being here this morning in our sanctuary to help create this worshipful space. Let us now take a moment to breathe deeply together, to center ourselves, maybe placing both feet on the ground. Take a deep breath in as we think about this beloved community and the energy that it brings to us. Breathing out any concerns or feelings that might be standing in our way of being fully present to this sacred moment. Taking another breath in and out, and as we exhale, we make our exhale very long, which relaxes our bodies. And we begin now with our prelude. Our opening words this morning are by the Reverend Dr. David Breeden, who's the minister of the First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis. Welcome to a new story. Welcome to a day unwritten. We gather to speak of possibility. We remember the losses. We celebrate the victories. As a people of story, we embrace the possible over than the probable, weaving a story of hope. Join us in this new story. Join us in the day unwritten. Join us in the future of possibility.
We light this chalice in honor of stories. Old stories and new stories. Stories of challenge and hope. The stories that shape us and the stories that move us forward.
This is a story that was first told to me by the Reverend Chris Bice, who is the minister of the Tennessee Valley UU Church in Knoxville. Once upon a time, in a land far away, there was a beautiful and powerful tiger who roamed the jungle, feeling her supple strength beneath her skin. But one day, she was captured by a mean and cruel man who put her in a cage. The man kept the cage in the jungle just a little ways from his house. And every day, he would bring the tiger a bowl of food and some fresh water to drink. Sometimes the tiger would see her own reflection in the water bowl, and she would say to herself, "My, I am such a beautiful tiger." But when the man heard her saying this, he would say, "No, you're not. You are ugly. Such an ugly tiger you are, and a pitiful, pitiful creature." And sadly, the tiger believed the man. Some days after she ate her food, the tiger would walk back and forth, pacing in her cage, and she would just begin to feel that energy moving through her body. And she would say, I must be a powerful tiger. But when the man heard her say this, he would lie and tell her, no, you are weak and puny. Such a pitiful, pitiful creature you are. And sadly, the tiger would believe the man. And then one day when the man was nowhere around, a lion happened to walk by the cage, and the lion saw the tiger and spoke to her and said, beautiful, powerful tiger, what are you doing lying around in that cage? Don't make fun of me, replied the tiger. I know I am not beautiful, nor powerful. I'm not making fun of you, the lion said. You're surely the most beautiful and powerful tiger I've ever seen. I'm only surprised to see you lying there when you're clearly strong enough to break out of that cage. Do you really think I could break out of here? The tiger said. Oh, it should be easy, said the lion. Well, the tiger was not so sure at first. She'd been told so many times how weak and puny and pitiful she was. But suddenly, it seemed like she could feel that energy and strength moving through her body, and she began once again to pace back and forth, feeling that energy. And then, without much thought, she leaped at the cage door, and it flew open without any resistance. Once outside, she was almost dazed, and she said, there was not even a lock on that door. I spent so much of my life stuck in there, and it was open all the time. The lion looked at her with soft brown eyes and said, those kinds of traps don't need locks. For it is the untrue stories that we believe that keep us in our cages. And it is the true ones that will set us free. And this is the way it happened.
Our reading this morning is The Stories We Tell by Chris Bateman. Our lives are shaped and guided by the stories we tell about ourselves. There are the stories you tell about yourself, your self-image, which dictate what you can bring yourself to do or attempt. There are the stories you tell about others, innocent gossip, news and chatter, or pernicious slander, prejudice and defamation. There are stories we tell of the interpretation of observations, which go by the misleading terms of facts and knowledge. And stories we tell of what cannot be observed or tested ineffable beliefs, which philosophers term metaphysics. The metaphysical stories that we tell lie at the heart of who we are, both as individuals and as cultures. It is easy to make the mistake of believing you don't tell such stories, that they are a thing of the past, and anyone who believes in untestable stories is somehow deficient. But even this is a metaphysical story that distorts our perspective. If we are to mock those who have a faith in an immortal afterlife, or who believe in the power of a transcendent force to save us, must we not also mock those who have faith in science to grant them immortality, or who believe that technological progress will save us, even while our environment rots under the resource gluttony facilitated by the equipment we have already engineered? The thing with glass houses is that they are hard to see, especially when you are focused upon hefting your stones. There is a malicious tendency that all humans possess to some degree, which fools us into believing that the way to solve problems is to convince other people that their stories are wrong and our stories are right. But changing the stories we tell about ourselves transpires to be exceedingly difficult, except when a crisis awakens that potential within us. Effort exhausted on attempts at conversion, no matter the stories being sold, are counterproductive. They hurt the reputation of whichever culture the stories being forced upon others belong to, regardless of whether that culture is a traditional religion or a progressive liberalism. Once we accept freedom of belief, the right of each and every one of us to be the sole determinant of which stories we tell, the problems facing the world become very different. The crises become far more tractable than if we insist on believing the demon that whispers, "Everything will be better when everyone tells the same stories as you." Then the challenge becomes finding those stories that are compatible with the tales people already tell about themselves, those which allow us to agree upon the problems that need addressing, and thus apply solutions. The stories we tell are fundamental to who we are, but they are also elemental to what we can achieve. One story, told in an appropriate fashion and couched in language viable to its audience, can change the world. Indeed, there are many such stories which have already changed the world. Zarathustra or Plato's stories of good and evil as absolutes. Buddha or Jesus' stories of universal love. Darwin's stories of descent with modification. Nietzsche and Kierkegaard's stories of reality as interpretation. Einstein's stories of relativity. The question we face in trying to get to grips with our existence appears to us all too often as, which stories are true? Yet, truth in this sense means little more than assessing compatibility with the stories you have already accepted. Instead, I suggest the question, which stories shall we tell?
Let us center ourselves now into a prayerful, deeper moment of reflection. Spirit of life, untamed by any name we can give you, grant us the ease with which to breathe deeply of this moment, this miracle that is the now. Help us to see the new story that unfolds before us this day, the story that lies just below the surface of the harsh news, the urgent crises, our certainties, and bring us instead to the perfection of this moment and to the grace of what is possible. Help us let go of the stories that no longer serve us. Shift our gaze instead to the stories we need to tell. Stories of justice, of beloved community, of how that community might be shaped by our efforts. Remembering perhaps the man from Galilee who more than 2,000 years ago saw signs of who we might become and shared that vision through stories of salt and yeast, pearls and seeds, travelers and tax collectors, sowers and charlatans, foreigners and fishermen. Open our hearts, ready our ears, that we might believe and share life-giving stories of justice and joy. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
At the start of any given day, there is mystery available. There is a game waiting for an open heart to say yes. Here I am, I'll play. And if we're smart, we'll listen to the way, and all the misery that held us down, we'll let it fade. Let it be outshined by a simple spark of a life that's waiting to be made. It's waiting to be made. What will you make of this day? What will you keep? What will you change? What will you see? What will you believe? What will you make of your dreams? Will you keep sleeping, or will you awaken and decide what you will make? At the start of any given day, there is history and poetry. There is a play, but you're not in the audience. You are the star. So get out there and say what you will make. What will you make of this day? What will you keep? What will you change? What will you see? What will you believe? What will you make of your dreams? Will you keep sleeping, or will you awaken and decide just what you will make of this day? What will you keep? What will you change? What will you see? And what will you believe? What will you make of your dreams? Will you keep sleeping, or will you awaken and decide what you will make?
Once upon a time, a long time ago, in the beginning. So what happened was, these are all beginnings of a story. All words that, when brought together, signify that it is time to listen and take in what is being said next. The beginnings of a journey. Now, what is a story? A simple way of thinking of a story is events linked in a sequence across time according to a plot. So basically, a story is the meaning that has been made by taking different things that have happened together, and that creates a story. And stories are something that is so much a part of our lives. We are, from a very young age, are told stories, whether the stories are told at bedtime, or we are told stories on TV and PBS, or we are listening to stories being shared between people. Stories are constantly being shared and offered, and so we are surrounded by stories. And those stories help us understand ourselves and understand the world that we are living in. Some of these stories are also ones that are given to us or told about us. So they may not be the stories that we would share, or our engagement is the stories that people have said, oh, this is your story. And we have to navigate what that means, what that story tells us. Because when you change the story, then you change your understanding of what those events mean. And so we can redefine ourselves if we change the stories that we share. And this is a key component of the field of narrative therapy, which asks you to look at the different stories that you tell. And remember, as we talked about, the stories are events linked in a sequence across time according to a plot. What if you looked at those events but changed the plot? How does that help you understand what those events mean? So you're not creating fiction. You are investigating the story and finding new meaning. And sometimes when you do that work, you find other events that you did not realize were there or had forgotten about, but help shape a new story. When I was young, like elementary school, I loved to sing. I sang in the children's choir at church, and I loved singing in choirs that came up or opportunities to sing at school. I loved singing. It was just so much a part of my experience. And then at some point in high school, actually, no, this was middle school. At some point in middle school, I stopped singing. And I don't know what exactly happened. Like I can't pinpoint the moment where the shift happened. But my memory is that I couldn't sing. You know, it must have been my voice changing and trying to understand that, and no one supporting that my understanding. I'm pretty sure that had to be what it was, but I don't remember a moment or an instance where someone said something. I just know that my narrative changed to for me to say that I don't sing. And so I stopped singing. Well, I stopped singing in public. Um, I still love to sing, and there were many times that I would be at home in my room singing to songs on the radio, or to one of my CDs. So I did enjoy singing, but not to a place where I would do it publicly. Like singing in a choir was not, and I would tell people, "Oh, I can't sing," and that maintained for quite a while, until several years after college. Um, and I remember I was at a concert for the Boston Rainbow Gospel Choir, and I remember listening to them perform, and gospel music is always something that has resonated with me, and I just loved the music, and there was a part of me that really wanted to sing with them. Uh, and at the end they mentioned that they welcomed everyone to sing, and I was too still had that narrative that I couldn't sing, so I said I didn't join, but I kept thinking about it. So the second time I went to one of their concerts and they said that, I said, well, I guess I can try. Um, and so I went and sang, and no one said anything. And in fact, someone said I had a nice voice, which wasn't something in my awareness. And so I reconnected with my ability to sing. And I realized, looking back, that in all the time that I talked about I couldn't sing, I never talked about how much I sang as a child. I didn't reconnect to that until after I reclaimed singing. And I remembered that part of the story. And so now, I sing whenever I can, and sing with choirs. And in fact, not too long after I joined the gospel choir, I had the opportunity to actually sing in a musical. I and started doing musicals. I really jumped into that part of myself, um, but I had to reclaim it and then evaluate the story that I told. And so the story I tell now is much different than the story I told uh, many years ago. And as we continue to think about these stories that we tell, there are also stories that get told in community. I mean, think for a moment, what are the stories that you tell about your family or your community or your congregation? What types of stories are they? Now, what are the stories that have led you to be the group of people that you are? And what stories might lead you to be the people you want to be? What stories might create the space, the opening to realize your vision of your congregation, to help be the change you want to see? You know, I see this all the time. This sense of uh, the stories that we tell and the stories they're holding. Sometimes the stories that we tell, particularly as organizations, tend to be much more aspirational than the reality. Which on the flip side, for some reason, I see that the stories that people tell are often about who they are afraid they might be, but not necessarily who they are or who they could be. And so as you think about your stories, you know, I've experienced in UU congregations this clear story of how open and welcome they are. And I've seen things written in orders of service when I've gone to visit that talk about their openness and their welcoming, which makes me feel so excited to be there that all of me will be accepted and embraced. And my experience of the congregation doesn't match that story. My experience might be that the congregation that talks about, you know, their openness might not actually talk to me because I'm new. I have been at the congregations that says, you know, take a red cup and someone will speak to you, and have sat the entire time in coffee hour with a red cup, talking to no one, except for someone that I might have known beforehand and reached out to. Or the sense of everyone is accepted, but not really. And so I think there's a tension between who we are and who we want to be. And we can tell a different story that maybe honors who we are, but can lead us towards that aspirational peace. There are also stories that are not shared. Stories that get lost in the midst of things. I've been doing my family history since the beginning of the pandemic. It was kind of my my pandemic like pandemic work, and I've been doing family history before, but I just really threw myself back into it, and I've discovered so many stories that were never passed down. Stories of people who I would have loved to know about, but that stories weren't shared and connected. Stories of ancestors who were pioneers. And I when I hear of the pioneering time, which has its own problematic pieces in itself, but when I hear of the people who were involved, I rarely hear of someone who was Black being involved. And yet I have stories of ancestors starting communities or being founding members of cities that I had never heard, and would be wonderful pieces of knowledge to grow up with, of engaging. And I wonder what other stories do not get told because they have been lost or erased even. They've been removed from our understandings. So I invite you to think about your stories and our collective stories as a congregation. Do we tell the stories we really want to tell? Are there stories that are missing? How can we reclaim those lost stories and live into who we want to be and who we might already be if we just understood? And so I close this part of our story together. And although I cannot guarantee a happily ever after, I do wish that for each and every one of you. Blessed be.
Thank you, Reverend Darrick, for those important reminders of how powerful stories are and the effect that they can have on our lives. And the story of this community continues. We can help ensure that that story remains true to who we want to be through our financial contributions. If you would like to make a contribution this morning, instructions for doing so will be on your screen. I invite you to be generous as we take up this morning's offering. Thank you, Kate. And thank all of you this morning who have made generous contributions to this congregation. We are grateful. And I am grateful to everyone who's in the sanctuary with me this morning, who has helped create this worshipful service. And that includes all of you who are home or wherever you are who have joined us this morning. Thank you. And please stay for coffee hour after our service. Our closing hymn this morning is "You've Got to Do When the Spirit Says Do." The words are going to be on your screen, so I invite you to sing along with Joan from wherever you happen to be.
Do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do it, oh Lord. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. 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 You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you gotta dance, oh Lord. You gotta dance when the Spirit says dance. 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 You gotta love when the Spirit says love. You gotta love when the Spirit says love. When the Spirit says love, you gotta love, oh Lord. You gotta love when the Spirit says love. 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 Spirit says love.
Our closing words this morning are by the Reverend Sherry Woodbury. May we have the courage to speak or write the stories within us that need to be told, the stories that make up our lives. May we listen with a loving mind and heart to the stories of others' lives, others here in this congregation and others in the wider community and world. Let us choose with care the stories that we teach our children, remembering that all of our stories have power and that all of our stories are connected, for all of life is one. In the name of all that is sacred in these gathered hearts, may it be so. Go in peace, my friends.